Hello and welcome to a bite-sized look at ordinarily available provision. Now, this is probably a term that some people might come across, but it's becoming more and more of a thing that's spoken about. And I wanted to go through what this actually means and what this can actually look like, because it is quite crucial to the EHCP part. Because this is what decisions are generally based on when LAs and tribunals are making decisions around whether a child needs an EHCP. So when we're looking at EHCP, we're looking at the difference between what they call ordinarily available provision at SEN level versus what they would need for an EHCP. So in order to understand that, we need to know really what ordinarily available provision actually means. So I'm going to try to explain it. So then hopefully everybody has an idea and an understanding of what this actually means. So what actually is ordinarily available provision, OAP as they call it? So ordinarily available provision is support that is available at school that they would be able to provide from resources that they already have. Each LA has a different idea on what this looks like. So basically what we're stating is, under the current budgets that they have with a child on the SEND register, so that includes what they would get for a child on the SEND register, whatever a child can provide from whatever a school can provide from their resources that they already have, from all of the expertise within the school, like interventions, additional resources, visuals, fidgets, that kind of stuff. If the school have the budget for it, if the school already have a system in place for all of that, they can provide it without any additional cost. That'd be ordinarily available provision. Now, just to put that on a pause a minute, because there was once upon a time, which I don't hear much of it nowadays, and I'd have to look into it a bit more to see if it is possible, where EHCPs could be put in place simply because schools are failing to meet needs of a child or young person. However, in those circumstances, it was felt that the provision a child needed that had been identified was OAP. But because it was continuously failing to provide support, then the EHCP was put in place to protect the child's rights on provision and ensure that provision was provided. Now, I know that can still happen, but it is rare that it does happen. So I just wanted to put that in there while we're talking about OAPs and EHCPs, just for a bit of understanding that still can happen, but it is rare that it happens. But in this context of what we're looking at, the reality is, when we're looking at EHCPs, is we are making that decision or understanding whether what a child's provision is it OAP, ordinarily available provision, that is already available at SEN level in school, or is it above and beyond that? And that is what the legal test is to look at whether a child needs an EHCP or not. So what would a school be expected to provide under OAP? So there's not actually a definition by law what actually is ordinarily available provision. There's nothing written, there's nothing, clearing it up. So it is massively a very broad term that is down to interpretation. There are some local authorities now that have produced documents on what their expectation of OAP is. However, when you go to tribunal, sometimes that doesn't marry, it doesn't match up. Also, when we look at schools and what's available, and what they can do, that can vastly differ from school to school, and there's lots of different variables, but which we're going to look at in a minute, on why that is. But often schools will be expected to be providing, or expected to provide visuals, fidgets, provision, teaching interventions as part of OAP. So, there is a level of expectation from everybody, from tribunal, from local authorities, on what a school should be providing at basic SEND level, and visuals, fidgets, provision teaching interventions, they're considered to be OAP. There's nothing in there that's considered to be above and beyond. It's when interventions become more intense or very specific that we are actually looking at an EHCP level of provision. So do all schools provide the same OAP? No. So what a school provides as OAP is dependent on the school's resources, expertise of the school staff, and the cohort of children and the needs they have. So for example, if you were in a school and there were 6 children that needed Lego therapy and 1 child that needed animal therapy, the likelihood is the school are going to fund Lego therapy and all 6 children and then will end up doing Lego therapy, even though that 1 child's provision recommended and stated needed is animal therapy, because the resources can't pay for everything and the cohort of children that are there, the biggest majority is that they need Lego therapy. What the school are going to do, and the only way they can really do it, is to fund the need that is biggest. And I know that's not necessarily right, and I know that means that they are missing children's needs or not being supported, etc. properly, but in the situation that schools are in with their limited budget, that's how they have to work. They have to cater for the greatest need. So what OAP is available, what resources they have, and what expertise in school they have is all dependent on the greatest need within school, because the teachers are going to be trained on that greatest need. The teachers are going to have resources around that great need, and the interventions are going to be around that greatest need. So if we do have children that are in school that need provision that is not within what the greatest need of school is, that's not going to be OAP, because that school cannot provide it. That would then be above and beyond what that school are able to deliver. However, if you went to the school next door and that one person, so for example, they had 5 people needing animal therapy and 1 needing Lego therapy, they would do the animal therapy. So this is where it gets really tricky to get a definition or a full understanding of what's OAP, because it really, really is. It's a moving, it's constantly moving, it's constantly changing, it's constantly developing, it's constantly dependent on cohorts of children and the greatest need at that moment in time. So even though the decision on an EHCP is around what's ordinarily available provision, reality is it's a very open book. Whether it's decided whether a child needs an EHCP or not is a very open book. It's very woolly, it's very non-specific, and it really, really differs from area to area, and it's so open to interpretation that you can get a different result on that legal test from many people. So does this mean no children, young people will need an EHCP? No. If a child needs provision that is more than that is ordinarily available at school SEND level, then they would need an EHCP to support the child, young person's special educational needs. So although I have said that obviously it's very difficult to define what OAP is, but we do have quite a significant amount of children that are within our schools that have EHCPs, because what we are, they are very complex. I hate that word in itself, because there's not really any definition of what complex is, but it's very, very clear that it's above and beyond what a school can provide. What I tend to find is that OAP really kicks in when we're on that fine line where we know we've got a child that really might cope, might manage, and might thrive in mainstream school with the right support. But because there's that ability and capability of thriving, it's often then misinterpreted as, well, with this little bit of support they can manage in school, so it's ordinarily available provision. So yes, it, you know, in some situations with some children, you know, that definition of what OAP is and how that's work and what schools can provide is so important. But there is quite a number of children where it's very, very clear that no amount of OAP that's available is going to be suitable enough, and they do need definitely an EHCP plan because they need such a specific provision and school to be able to attend it, or even at a stage where they're not even able to attend school. So no, it doesn't mean that does this mean that no children, young people will need an EHCP? No, it just makes it really, really difficult, especially with masking children, those children that are not very obvious, or it's not very clear to the untrained eye what SEN needs they are. That's what makes OAP really kick in, and that's where you really need to have an understanding of what that looks like, how different that's going to look for your child, and what schools in your area are able to deliver at SEN level.